Welcome to the Greater Culture Podcast, where we have conversations about how to elevate the quality of life through movement, nutrition, recovery, and mindset practices.
Welcome to another episode of the Greater Culture Podcast. Your host, Brad Marshall. Today, I am joined by Katrina Steady. Katrina is somebody I've known for a number of years and is actually a big reason for the job I currently hold. So I'm very grateful to her for that. We've consulted and worked together in the performance psychology world. And I'm going to let her tell a little bit about her story. But Katrina, thanks so much for spending some time with me on the podcast today.
Yes, of course. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
So I said we go back a little ways. Our paths have crossed. And I always think it's fun to hear from people what their story is like on how they have found themselves in the positions they're in. So tell us a little bit about your story and how you've come to find yourself helping people when it comes to performance.
Sure. So I was always interested in how people work and did things. So my undergrad was psychology. And I had an amazing professor at the time because I was like, I'm not sure what I want to do next. And at the time, I think it was more in the realm of like social work, working with like delinquent teenagers and, helping children with the psychology aspect of things that maybe are going through some troubling times. And I don't know, I was a little confused by it. And so this one professor told me about sports psychology. And I actually took one whole course credit just investigating and researching what sports psychology was. And at my college at the time, we didn't have anything around sports psychology. So I spent one semester really diving deep into the research of what sports psychology, the field was, what it looks like, what it's all about. And it really sparked my interest and got me thinking, I feel like with psychology, we're trying to help people who have issues. And with sports psychology and in even positive psychology, we're trying to get people to their best selves. And how can they be better? And they're already great, but to take them to that next level. And these are people who want to be better. So they're more invested in it. They're more excited about it. And they're actually much more pleasurable to work with because of that. And so it opened my eyes to the opportunities that I could dive into sports psychology. So I went and got my master's at Barry University in Miami Shores, Florida. And there I got the hands-on experience working with athletes on the mental side of things. And I feel like that was early on in the sports psychology field. And it was like, where are you going to even work? Where are you going to get a job? And at that time, the biggest place that was hiring was the Army. And I was like, well, that's a male dominated field. And, there's soldiers, they go to war and a lot of them are males. I'm a female. I don't know if that's what's going to happen. And, I tried for a little bit to kind of go off on my own and be my own consultant and did a lot of cold calling. And that was challenging. But I went to a few sports psychology conferences. And I think the first one I went to was in Rhode Island, and I had met a connection who was somebody hiring for the Army. And that's when I started to get involved and get hired on by the Army as a contractor, teaching sports psychology, performance psychology, being in the field with them and seeing all the amazing things that they did as soldiers. They were mentally tough individuals. It was so inspiring. And, thinking about the things that they do to put their life on the line is wild. And to have the opportunity to teach to them was amazing. And then also within that, we did a lot of the positive psychology and the resilience training. And I feel like I did that for about 5 years. And one of my peers is somebody that we have our connection with. She made the jump to the corporate world. And I was like, you know what, let's do that. And so I followed her into the corporate world. And that's when I transitioned and was able to really transition all of my skills about leadership development with the soldiers to leaders in organizations, to managers, to executives. And my responsibility there was developing the general individual contributor, the employee, doing some webinars. And I really enjoyed that. And so that kind of spiraled out to be really mostly what I'm doing now. is working in corporate environments, working one-on-one, coaching people, working in team settings, or even just the organization as a whole, acting as a coach or a consultant to teach some of the resilience and the sports psychology, but a lot of the things that make leaders great.
One of the things that really stands out is the passion you have for helping people. You can hear it, how excited you get about the field, the work you've been able to do, the work you're doing now. One of the funny things I always find is when you try and explain to people what you actually do, they're always looking at you like, I'm not sure I quite understand. We throw the term sports psychology and performance psychology out there. How have you come to understand those terms, or how would you describe the work that you do to others who maybe are not familiar with the field that we're in?
Sure. And I think that's so funny because I feel I go back to when I was like cold calling people back in the day. And I think I
Hmm.
was trying to get in with like lawyers at the time. And I'm like, I'm a performance coach. I can help you better perform. And they're like, what? That sounds like a drug. Like, what do you mean? And so I bring it back to the basics of how I learned to describe it in grad school. Even like this many years later, I feel like it still works. And I think a lot of people in the field explain it this way too. But it's a conversation with the other person. You know, we all perform, whether you're an athlete or you're a manager or an executive or an individual contributor, you have work that needs to be done. You perform. And so, what percent of your performance is physical versus mental? And a majority of the time, people give a very high percent to the mental aspect of their work and their performance. And then the next question is, well, if that is such a large number of what you do in your performance, how the heck do you train that? How the heck do you work on that mental side? And usually it's like a deer in headlights of like, I don't know. Maybe that's why I'm talking to you, right? And so then that's kind of explaining, well, what is that mental aspect of your performance? And that's going to be different for everybody. And what's surprising to most people is that they already have strategies that they're using. And so my job is to shed light on what the strategies are that they're using and how they can use them more often to replicate what right looks like for them. And so it's almost this unpacking of the things that you're already doing, the strategies and mental toughness that you weren't even aware of. And now let's use it more often. And then also, what are the gaps and things and areas where you can improve a little bit better when it comes to your resilience and mental toughness? And hey, I got a few techniques and strategies that I can provide to you to help you be more confident, to communicate better, to have more empathy and understanding for others, to work better in a team. And so that's really how I explain it, is more of a conversation.
Yeah, I think that conversation, building trust and rapport with somebody enough to share some of those details of the areas that maybe are going well, but also the areas that aren't going so well, and understanding that there's a way that we can work on being more intentional, trains the mind to be able to adapt and handle certain moments. It's very common for us to look at nutrition or movement and say, "Oh, I know I can maybe eat a little better or move a little bit more to help get to these performance outcomes." And the same thing is true with the mindset, how we talk to ourselves, how we relate to others, which you highlighted. Talk to us a little bit about what you've learned between working with the military and working more in the corporate environment, because those sound like very contrasting demographics and types of people and what their outcomes are, what they're striving towards. Have you found there to be more similarities or more differences in the way you work with those folks? And I'd just be curious to hear your insight on that.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And there is a lot of similarities. There's so many more similarities than we would think, that, you know, we're all trying to lead people when it comes to the soldier aspect to complete a mission, or in the corporate world, we're trying to lead people to execute on a project or get a product out the door. And we're bringing people together to support each other. And I think that the key word I keep saying there is people. We're all people, we're all humans. And there's some creativity and experience that goes into that to be able to connect with others and lead others. And so I think that it's very similar in that aspect of things. But I think it's grounding when I have conversations with people in the corporate world. And I mean, every job is different. There are people who have the extreme jobs that they're a surgeon and somebody's life is on the line. Or, you're a police officer and you're doing some extreme things that I guess you could probably still relate that to being a soldier. And there are other maybe areas in corporate world that aren't as extreme and there is no fire drill, but for some reason they create this environment that feels like there's these crazy deadlines and people have to go hard or do whatever it takes to go above and beyond to get that next promotion. And sometimes it's their own expectations or sometimes it's the culture there, and their life isn't on the line. And you compare that there are jobs where people's lives are on the line and that you got to be that stressed out and find ways to maybe manage your stress better. But then I compare that to working with soldiers, that they do go in environments that they have to face combat situations and high stress, high pressure. People's lives are on the line. It's a little different. And so you can use very similar skills. It's just going to be applied differently. And it's also having the conversations with these different audiences to know, well, what's going to work best for them to get them through that moment and through that challenge. And also how to ground folks to see that, my world's not on fire. I can, handle this situation. There are some things in my control.
Hmm. Yeah, the things I heard you say there, this idea of the foundation is we're all people, which means we're going to see the world a certain way. It's going to impact the way we think, the way we feel, the stress we experience. And well, for some of us, that could mean a job that has some external risk, some, extra pressure. For some of us, maybe it's more of an internal pressure or a drive to accomplish a task or a to-do or hit a certain project. But at the end of the day, the way we process, the way we handle and work with all those internals, the thinking, the feeling, etc., it can be very similar. And some of the characteristics or ways we go about doing that can be very similar. And so I'm curious, when you think about the skills that you trained with the military and helping them to navigate their day-to-day, get ready for maybe some unknown risks or things that they're getting prepared to travel for. And then you compare that to the corporate world where, like you said, they've got deadlines, we've got projects, we've got sales that we're trying to hit. What are some of those skills that you've seen be sort of transferable or apply across the board? Maybe some of the ones that you find to be most prevalent or keep coming up again and again in the work you do with others.
Sure. So I think we go back to the people aspect, that we all are thinking beings. We all have thoughts. And those thoughts can be productive or counterproductive and impact how you now have an emotional reaction and a physiological reaction. So I think that is something that comes up so often in conversations with many different audiences, is just bringing more awareness to our thoughts and our pattern of thinking so that we can figure out how can we adjust it and be more productive there. And I want to hit on the emotional aspect, because I think even as a culture, we try to push our emotions aside. And you see that in so many performances of, like, get over it, move forward, like keep driving. We have some cost cutting here, but you just got to deal with it and keep going and just ignore the situation. And we need to bring the emotions to the surface more often. We need to talk about them and create an environment where it's okay to not be okay. We keep hearing that part of it, but like talk about it too and allow us to get through that emotion fully, rather than putting it under the carpet and we'll worry about it later. And we're so busy in the corporate world that it's like meeting after meeting and deliverable after deliverable. We don't have that time to just pause and reflect. And I think that's where my role comes into play, is to allow people the space to pause and to reflect and think about, how did they handle that situation? What could they have done differently, or what did they do well? And so that we can talk through, what can they improve for next time that you face a similar situation so that you have more productive thoughts, emotions, and reactions, and you can handle it better and be more resilient in those moments. Um, so I think that that is the biggest kind of discussions that I have
Mhm.
that is most impactful when it comes to people's thoughts, emotions, and reactions.
Yeah, it is fascinating to think how much we're constantly talking to ourselves throughout the day. And is that conversation that's ongoing productive, helping us move forward in the way we'd like or not? And the secondary effect of that is those emotions, because there's going to be an ebb and a flow to the emotions, what we're experiencing based on information we're constantly receiving. And are those helpful or productive? So I'd love to peel back the layers on the emotional side just a little bit, because some people might hear that and they think, okay, yeah, I get it. I should probably be in touch with my emotions, or maybe I should be a little bit more tuned in, but I don't have time for that. My job, my life requires me to keep showing up, keep moving forward, and emotions might feel like either a waste of time or energy to sit and think about those or see what's going on there. What would you say to somebody who maybe has that perspective? Because I don't know about you, but I've certainly come across a variety of folks who fit into that category of, I don't have time. I don't think it's worth it to sit and really experience or observe what's going on with the emotions.
There's so much there, right? And I think the first one is the consequence piece of it. If you don't face this right now, if you bottle those emotions up and you don't actually have the self-awareness in this moment to unpack it, that's going to lead to burnout. And we're seeing that on the rise in the corporate world of people burning out and not being able to take that time to reflect because we're go, go, go. But the other side of that too is I'm going to bring up Susan David, who is known for her research on emotional agility. And she even has the book Emotional Agility. And she talks about how our emotions are data points, that they're telling us something. And we have positive and negative emotions, and they all have a place and a purpose. And when maybe we're feeling a sense of loss as humans, we're going to go take action and maybe call a friend or go get coffee with a colleague. We're going to do something about it because that emotion is telling us something's not right here. I got to fix it. And so if you as a leader are going to ignore the signs that your body is telling you, okay, it can lead to burnout. But now let's think about the external impacts, not only to yourself and your well being, but now to your team. And what kind of culture and environment are you creating where maybe now your team also feels like they got to do the same thing and follow through just like you are? And now you're creating a whole environment where everyone's susceptible to burnout. And don't you want your team to be high performing and engaged and at the level where they want to be at? And so are you willing to take the risk and accept the consequences of not talking through the emotional aspect just because you don't feel like you need to or you have the time?
Yeah, I like that you said the variety of consequences, both on the internal individual side as well as the external, what's going on around me. And so, from the personal standpoint, yeah, burnout is certainly on the rise. High levels of stress. I mean, you hear about the what the status of mental health is in the U.S. these days, and it's not a pretty picture. And so a lot of that has to do with some of this emotional stuff that you're highlighting. And then you look at the external. We want to be high performers. We want our teams to be high performing, but sometimes we almost handicap ourselves there as well because we're not willing to be open or vulnerable. So for folks who are, listening and are like, okay, maybe there is something to this in terms of being aware of or getting in tune with emotions, what I'm experiencing, because it's my body trying to relay some messages. Are there certain either strategies, tactics, things that you introduce to leaders or folks who are interested in, hey, how do I maybe get in touch a little bit more or be aware of that can help me be a better employee, a better significant other, a better leader? What are some of the strategies or tactics you have found to be successful with that?
Sure. And I think everybody's different. I'm gonna
Mhm.
throw that out there. But it's about taking care of yourself. And I think that's the side. Okay, so you might not want to talk about the emotion right now, but what can you do to be more effective with your energy and take care of yourself if you're not willing to talk about the emotions yet? And I think that's just a huge piece of it. And also what we would want to see leaders role model is them being able to take care of themselves, that they aren't the ones going back to back meetings, that they do have a 5 or 10 minute slot of time, or they block time on their calendar that's just for them. Or you know what, they decide that the gym is important and they're going to tell their team on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'm going to be late to work because that is the time that I can go to the gym. And if you want me to show up the best way that I can, and it's the why too, sharing it with others and also telling the why behind it. Like, I'm not just going to the gym, but I am going to the gym so that I can show up my best self for myself and for you all as a team. And so I think that it's knowing what it is that you need to do to take care of yourself. Is it the physical aspect? Is it spiritual? Is it connection with others? What is it that you need to do to fill your cup to get there? And I think that each individual needs to figure out what that is for them.
Yeah, it's almost like having the sense of clarity around what are my non-negotiables? What are the things that when I either add these or these are included in my day, it allows me to be the type of employee, be the type of significant other that I need to be. And if it's time set aside for mindfulness and meditation, movement, or eating a certain way, or recovery practices, time in between meetings, that can go a long way in helping you not only just sustain where you're at, but actually thrive. And I know that's a big piece around the resilience training that you've shared with others is not just getting by each day, but actually thriving and getting the most out of what we're capable of. So talk to us about how do you help leaders or others shift maybe that mentality from just surviving or treading water, getting by to, hey, can we get ahead of the curve and actually push performance to another level, or what we'd say is thrive?
Yeah, and this goes back to what we were just saying too. And I think a great activity that I have folks do is, we could call it the well-being circle.
Mhm.
For people to really list out what are the things in your life that are most important for you. What are those 5 to 8 things that you need fulfillment from? So like we brought up the physical aspect. Is it physical working out? Is it family time? And obviously you have work. That's something that's part of your life as well. Is it meditation or mindfulness? List all of those things out. And then on a 1 to 10 scale, rate yourself. How are you doing right now? How often are you spending your time meditating? How often are you spending your time going to the gym in a given day or a given week? And then they can reflect for themselves, where are they falling short? Because maybe they have like a 10 at work and then the gym is at like a 3. And they themselves can see, we talk about balance. Well, where am I having to sacrifice my time? And now where should I change and adapt so that I can fill up those areas a little bit more? So if your gym is at a 3, how can you get it to a 5? What is one thing you can do to improve that this week? And we know where we talk about, juggling all these things at once. And the big question that I feel like comes up so often is like, how do you do it all? You can't do it all. You have to decide in this moment, in this time, where is your priorities and your focus areas. And you're not going to be able to show up perfect in all of those areas. So maybe right now you're 100% at work and you have a project that you need to get through for the next 30 days. And then after that 30 days, you know what, you're going to take a step back and maybe you'll be 70% at work and a little bit more in the home life, or whatever else when it comes to your hobbies that you'll be able to get and fill up your cup and know what that looks like for you. But knowing the sacrifices and the balances that you have to make, that is balancing, I think. And that's what, if individuals can take the time to think through that for themselves, they'll be able to have more control over their boundaries and what they want to spend their time on.
Yeah, I love that exercise of mapping out the different areas, how important those are, where you're at right now with the importance. And then, like you said, having an acceptance that life is going to ebb and flow. And while we would love to be a 10 for all these areas in terms of how we feel like we're operating, that's just not going to be the case. We know there's only so much time in a day. And if I'm dedicating more time to work, that might mean not quite as much time in some other areas. But we know that that can change over time. So you mentioned some of the areas for this well-being circle or self-assessment. What are those areas that you really love to have people assess to make sure they're sort of hitting the whole picture here and not leaving something out?
Sure. And I think that goes to your identity too, that you also have to chunk it out of, like, you have your personal life. What within your personal life is important? And then you have your professional life, or, your performance. And, we have a variety of identities. Maybe it's personally you're a wife, you're a daughter, you're a friend, figuring out what you are in that personal life, because there are many identities there. And then when it comes to your performance and your work, are you a leader? Are you an athlete? Are you a teammate? And also figuring that out so that you can at least have big picture, this is the areas. And again, knowing how much time do you want to spend in maybe the bigger buckets to help them identify what that looks like for them.
I like that of finding the differentiation between personal and work, because I think that balancing act is where a lot of us struggle of, man, I want to go to work because I want to do good. I want to provide for my family. I want to, leave a legacy, whatever that is. But I know by me doing that, it's now taking away from time I get to spend with family and friends and doing my own hobbies. Do you find people tend to struggle with that in the line of work that you do of, I want to be a high performer at my job. I also would love to be a high performer at home in my personal life. And comes a point in time where it's hard to do both.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to wanting to do it all. And I'm going
Mhm.
to go back to what you said earlier, Brad, about what I think is important here is the self compassion piece, that and the people I work with too, like, they are high performers. There are some people that will do whatever it takes to get that next promotion and to climb that corporate ladder. Great. But know that you're going to have tough days. Know that you're not going to be able to show up 100% in all areas all the time, and that there's going to be days that, like we said, we're not okay. And it's okay to not be okay today and not show up 110%. Have some self compassion and let yourself off the hook. And we even have our to-do list for the day. And I think something that I personally do, because my to-do list, I never get it all done. But halfway through the day, I do a check of, like, reality. I said there was these 10 things that I wanted to do, but I'm at number 2. So let's revisit and let's have a goal of maybe 4 of these things being accomplished today. And I'm going to let myself off the hook and not put this pressure on myself to do it all. And so I think that that's a huge skill to practice, because that just allows you to let go of the weight of the world and helps to decrease those stress levels. Just give yourself a break and have some self compassion.
Mm. That's such a hard skill to not only learn, but to practice, because it's so easy to look around at what everyone else is doing and be like, they have it all. Like, they're put together, they're crushing it at work. Apparently, their home life is perfect. And I feel like a mess or feel like a disaster, and that you're not living up to a standard that doesn't even exist. We've concocted this in our mind. So the idea of self-compassion is so important, to understand that, hey, everybody's on their own journey, figuring out, where am I right now? I can be okay with that, and I can still want to improve or get better. It's okay to have both of those thoughts in our head at the same time. And you started to hint on some of the skills. Oh, did you have something you wanted to say there or add there?
Well, I just want to add, because I think it's the goals piece too. We
Mhm.
so often, like you're right, and social media makes it so hard that we're seeing all of everybody else. We're in everybody else's world, and we got to be in our own world, and we have to set our own goals that are our own standard of what great is, so that we can focus on our path versus everything and everybody else and comparing ourselves. So I just wanted to add that.
No, I think that that captures it perfectly. And it was actually a book I finished up reading, The First Rule of Mastery, Fear of Other People's Opinions. And it's that exact core tenet of we get so wrapped up in what everyone else is doing or what everyone else thinks of us that it keeps us from playing big, keeps us from taking the risks, keeps us from really going out there and doing the things we'd like to do because I don't really want to put myself out there. Or I don't want to compare myself to others. So, like you said, focusing on your own goals, what you're striving towards, and what you're working towards is one of the big keys. You started to highlight and allude to some of the things that you like to do. I think it's always fascinating to talk to practitioners like you and me who talk about these skills and work on reinforcing those with others. What are some of the skills you have found to be most beneficial or helpful in your own life? Because I always think that's fun to figure out, hey, I talk about these concepts or these practices. Here's the ones that I actually personally really like or enjoy that help me to thrive and feel like I'm moving in the right direction. So, what are some of the skills or practices, habits, if you will, that you have that you think help you to be able to show up as your best self each day?
Yeah, so I think of a few things. The first thing is purpose, and maybe this goes with the goals, and really knowing what my purpose is and what fills my cup, and my why is to support others and to inspire others and to teach them the mental toughness techniques so that they can perform their best when it matters the most. And that's what gives me joy and purpose. So identifying my purpose is one, and the second one, we talk about that well being. And for me, there was a time, having two kids, they're now 5 and 2, and going through COVID and taking a break on my physical well being and working out, and even just trying to during COVID at home doing workouts, and the kids are running around and I'm working out for like maybe 5 minutes, then I'm interrupted and you just get frustrated. You're like, me time, where's me time? It's not there. And so I've now finally started to go back to the gym and realizing I need to go to the gym to get that good workout. And I mean, just reflecting on this, I think I've been going now a year. The first day I went back to the gym and actually had a really good workout, I cried on my way home because I was like, I needed that so bad. And I didn't understand you forget all the positive impacts, how good you feel when you work out and you just feel emotionally better. And you can, again, I'm showing up better for my kids and for my husband and for my family because of that. So I know it's that physical piece, but also we think about the me time too. And people can invest their money how they see fit. You want to go on vacations, great. You want to spend a lot of money on maybe 5 different gyms, great. I need to go to the spa. I need to get a massage. That is exactly what I need to do. I make sure it's on my calendar at least once a month. That is what I need to do for my well being. And then I think the third piece is connection. And we know that we need connection in our lives as humans. And I know I as well. And I think for me, a lot of my work is remote. I do a lot of sessions, webinars, and one on one coaching virtually. So I don't get outside of the house. But yes, you have that connection virtually, but I need that human connection in person. And so I know those people that I can connect to. And again, making sure that I'm scheduling with, if it's play dates with my friends or just time with them at the spa, whatever that is, I know that's important for me. So those are like my big three things that help me be more resilient.
I love that there's a lot of intentionality behind them, and it actually highlights different pieces, if you will, about who you are as a person. There's the purpose and the mental side of like, can I find different practices that maybe help to reduce some of the stress or figure out ways that I can navigate that, recover a little bit more effectively. There's also some physical practices in there, movement, getting some workouts in, how beneficial that can be for both physical and mental health. And then the connection piece of, are there people I have that I can go to consistently and that I can connect with that help to, like you said, fill your cup. So having a variety of these practices around the mental, the physical, the emotional, the connection side, those are so important to know those and then have them blocked off on your calendar, because it's one thing to say, man, I really need to get a workout in 3 to 4 days a week to really feel my best. It's another to have it blocked off on your calendar and a non-negotiable that it's like, this is going to happen regardless of how my day is going. Same thing with connection and recovery. So I think that's a really important piece, is not only identifying it and then figuring out a way that it fits into your life and into your schedule, that it essentially becomes a non-negotiable, that like, this is how I can get there. Do you notice in those that you work with, like they have a hard time with that? Like they kind of have a sense of what they should do, we use the air quotes there, or want to do, but they have a hard time fitting it in to their schedule because we're all so busy.
Yeah, and that's so true, that is mostly what those conversations are about. Like, I'm too busy. And there's this other story that comes to mind, that it's like, are we really too busy? And if we really looked at our lives, we would know that we have the time. If for whatever reason some catastrophe happened in your house and the pipes froze, you would make sure to take action and make that a priority. And so you're flexible with your schedule, so you can make that happen. Um, but I think too, again, my job is to give people the time to reflect. Like when we're meeting, that is the moment that they've been, again, working all day. We have a connection point, and they get to finally let it all out and have the space to reflect and think about what they can do differently. And I think that is so helpful, and to be able to schedule that and be purposeful about it. Um, and so I think that if we can be more deliberate, I think that's what you're talking about, the proactive approach. And a lot of the things that we share with folks is common knowledge, but how do you make it common practice? And it's that habit that we're forming. And again, I see that as my job, right? Like, you're already doing these kinds of things, but like, how can we do it more often? How can you be accountable? What are you going to do to make sure that you are sticking to your plan?
Mm. It's fascinating, and I think almost funny to me, as things have continued to evolve and we've learned so much more. Things are more complex than maybe they've ever been. It still comes back to the most basic of, human needs, if you will: connection, movement, eating a certain way, feeling a sense of purpose, and like we're, working towards something. And when you boil it down to some of those basics, they become lost in all of the extras that are going on around us of, I need to have the perfect routine, I need to have the perfect workout plan and the perfect conversations with my kids and this and that, and it becomes overwhelming, where it's like, let's boil it down to the basics, do those well, and you'll be amazed at how much life starts to unfold in the way that maybe you'd like it to, because you've got the basics really narrowed down. And it speaks to this idea of, what's the quality of life, or what helps you to feel happy and fulfilled and have a sense of, like you mentioned, inspiring others. So when you think about this concept of quality of life, and, I think it's something we try and help others to develop and find. How have you come to think about or define, if you will, this idea of quality of life?
Yeah, I think I go back to what I shared with my strategies in understanding your purpose. And I think there's a lot of research too around, motivation and the meaning of life, to be able to find your purpose. And some people haven't had the chance to think about that. Like I said, I give them that opportunity to ask them the question, what is your purpose? What's your why? I haven't thought about that before. And to explore that a little bit more. And then also going back to them just taking care of themselves. And what does that mean for them and their well-being? And is that, are there things that they forgot about and they just need the reminder to be able to go back to maybe something that's worked well for them in the past that they need to get back on schedule and back on plan with? And I think, again, going back to connection and who is it in their network that they can ask for help from? Who in their network can they rely on? Who in their network is going to help with their motivation and also hold them accountable to get to that next point or the next phase or the next goal that they have for themselves.
I do love how simple that is in concept, or in theory, if you will, of, do I have a sense of my purpose? Do I have a sense of connection, surrounding myself with others who are going to help me get there? And then am I moving in the direction that's going to help fulfill that? So I think those are some really powerful tools and tips that we can use when we start thinking about quality of life. What does it mean for me, and how do I build it? One of the last questions that I have that I always like to gain some insight from others on is, what are some of the principles, standards, values, if you will, that you have found that sort of guide and influence the way that you live, the way that you think, the way that you work and operate with others? I know you and I personally have probably done more values exercises, both taking the assessments as well as delivering them, than anybody. So I'd love to hear, what are some of the values, the principles, or the standards that sort of guide or influence how you work and how you operate?
Yeah. And I think about my leadership principles and leadership philosophy. And as I explain it, you will definitely connect it back to the things we've already been talking about. You know, you hear it and see it in the way that we behave. And so the first one would be take care of yourself. And, I share these principles too with my team and anyone that's working with me so they can better understand who I am as a person and as a leader. And it's important for me to take care of myself, but it's important for them to take care of themselves so that we're all showing up the best selves that we can be. And again, that's for us to decide, is that family time? Is that physical fitness? Is that, gym time and meditation, whatever that is. And it's also the self-compassion piece and letting yourself off the hook. That's also taking care of yourself. The second principle is have fun in what you're doing. And I think about working with athletes, that you ask them, why did you start playing this sport? And it normally comes down to, it was fun, but I lost the fun. So where is the fun? You got to get the fun back. And even in our work life, people working on projects, it's more engaging and people are going to perform better when they're having fun. So let's have fun. A third principle is communication. I value communication. And I didn't realize this until there was a point in my career that we were planning an event. And I sent out one email that I thought was very detailed and greatly communicated. And it comes to a day before the event and all these people have questions. And I'm like, did you not reference the email? Did you not receive the email? And I was like, why didn't you read my email? Like, you should have asked me questions before. And I was realizing that communication is a value of mine. And I need people to communicate to me, but I also need to communicate as best as I can. And people have different communication styles. So to understand that it's not one email, it is an email, a second email, maybe a third email. It is a actual telephone conversation. It is texting, messaging. It is maybe a recording. It's a one pager. It is something that is said the same way, just 10 different ways, 10 different times. And so I value that. I understand that. And so I need that communication and I'm going to give that communication. And then I think the last one is about doing what's best for all. And a lot of the work we do, we're working, yes, one-on-one, but it's all about the people and the team. And so are you making the best decisions for not only yourself, but for everyone? Is it the best decision for, your small team, the larger team, the business, the organization? And you even think about athletes in individual sports, there's a team behind them. There is the mental performance coach, there is the regular coach, the strength and conditioning trainer. There's all these people. And so everywhere you look, it goes back to the people and us as humans. And so let's make the best decision that's going to impact the best for everybody. So those are my guiding principles.
Yeah, I love how clearly and succinctly you can articulate your leadership principles of self-care, fun, communication, and then this idea of we over me. And having the clarity there allows you to interact and communicate with your team of this is how you operate. They have a better sense of what to expect. They have a better sense of what maybe is expected of them. And it allows a more cohesive and ideally high performing team to move forward. So, Katrina, I want to say thanks so much for being able to articulate your ideas, how you think about working with others, the time you spent in the performance world, helping soldiers, helping corporate executives, helping everyday folks figure out ways that they can connect a little bit more clearly with their purpose, have a greater sense of clarity, and ideally move forward in the way that they'd like. So, thanks for spending some time with me on the podcast today.
Yes. And Brad, thank you for having me here. This conversation has inspired me. I'm going to go be great today.
It fits well since it's one of the hashtags we use for greater culture, which is hashtag be greater. I mean, that's what it's all about at the end of the day. So we appreciate that and appreciate your friendship over the years and continued support.
Awesome. Thank you, Brad.